Welcome everyone to our third quarterly financial forum. We're here today with Brian Dunhill from Dunhill Financial and of course Adrian and Patty from the Adrian Leeds Group. Before we start, please, if you have any questions, put them down in the Q&A and we'll get to them probably as we go and definitely at the end if we don't get to you. So Brian, would you like to introduce us?
Thank you so much, Paulina. Today, we're delighted to welcome Adrian Leeds, the founder and director of the Adrian Leeds Group, an organization dedicated towards helping Americans navigating life in France. Adrian's a longtime resident of Paris, a real estate expert, and a trusted advisor to those seeking how to buy, rent, or invest in French property.
Did you just invent all that, Brian?
We all know this. Everybody knows this. She's well known as a consultant, an author, a heckler of those on webinars, and a speaker at many expatriate events. But most of you probably recognize her from her time on House Hunters International and her fantastic writing. Make sure to actually sign up for all of her distribution lists and her fantastic events, which I understand Thanksgiving is one of the next big ones.
Yes. We have Thanksgiving dinner in Nice, and we've got it only about half full. Which is still a lot because we fully expect to have about 100 people in Nice for a Thanksgiving dinner. Isn't that fabulous?
What's on the menu?
What? Really? Did you really ask that? Brian, don't you think we should get started? This is a fantastic topic.
Perfect.
You know what it is, right?
I want to know everything I need to know about whether I should buy or rent when I move to France.
Well, it just happens that's one of the most asked questions I get. So I'm going to open up my PowerPoint presentation. Okay, hang on. Here we go. Let me put it on. And I need to share it, don't I? Hang on, I'll get there. Let's share that first. Here it is. And of course, I'm all the way at the end. So we're going to go back through.
A little whiplash for us. There we go.
I'm sorry. Is everybody okay? Okay, so it's true that I get this question asked literally almost every consultation because there are so many people who are not really ready to just plunk down, a few €100,000 into something if they really don't know exactly where they want to be. And so we always go through this conversation of what are the pros and cons of both and whether it fits. And for everybody, it's a little bit different because of their own personal situations, of course. And so, we have to go through what really works for each individual and what makes sense in their life and how often it has to do with what their age is and if they really want to commit to owning another piece of property or not. But, owning a property, my perspective is, of course, that owning is always better, almost always better than renting. But let's go through this and we'll talk about it. So when you're renting, the upside of renting in France is, of course, you have a certain level of flexibility to test out neighborhoods and towns. So not just neighborhoods, but also towns. Very often people are asking me, well, I don't know where to move to. What city should we be looking at? And one of the ways of determining that, other than talking with us, and we can really help them make that decision in advance, believe it or not, and rather than traipsing all over the country to visit every village and every town in France, which, by the way, will be very confusing because you'll fall in love with everywhere you go, is to settle yourself in one city, whether it be Paris or Nice or some other town where you really have access to everything, and then spend a year traveling around to determine what's going to make the most sense. And not just for the country, but also neighborhoods and cities. So if you've decided on a city, then maybe you want to rent something in the center of town, but you might ending up buying or renting somewhere else in that particular city. So it does give you the flexibility. Clearly, it's lower upfront costs. You know, when you rent an apartment, you're going to put down first and last month's rent. You're going to put down a security deposit. You're going to pay for probably our search fee. You might pay an agency fee, but it's certainly not as expensive as the upfront costs of making a purchase. When you purchase a property in France, you have notarial taxes and fees that are going to be anywhere from 7 to 8%. And then our fees are going to be somewhere between 3 and 4%. So there's an upfront cost of about 11 or 12% that, you know, is just an initial investment that you're not going to get back. And of course, one of the other upsides is that the landlord handles the maintenance, not you, but I made a note that it's not always so efficiently because not all landlords do their job. Not all landlords are that great. And, you know, you could end up with a faulty hot water tank and you have no hot water. And my answer to that is don't wait for the landlord, just call the plumber and have it fixed, because your comfort is a lot more important than the few bucks it's going to cost you to do that. But you really can't necessarily count on the landlord doing their jobs all that well. Now, I will say that when you hire an agency, an apartment via an agency, they tend to be better run than when you rent directly from the landlord. Now, what are the downsides? Well, there just aren't a lot of rentals. Paris and Nice the rentals are really scarce. There's a housing shortage and it's very, very tough to find property. The other thing is that in smaller towns, they don't really feel comfortable renting to foreigners. So even though they might have rentals, it's going to be harder to get an approval from a landlord simply because you're not French. And that's a problem. So you can more easily find a fabulous property to buy than you can to rent. And you have to be prepared to make some trade-offs with a rental. There's paperwork. You need a guarantor. We use a company called guarantme.fr. They're going to certify you for a rent that is no more than 1/3 of your disposable income. You're going to have to put together a dossier. You're going to write a motivation letter that says, "Dear landlord, you really need to rent to me because I'm this perfect person and I'm going to take care of your property." So there's a lot to do just to prepare for renting a property.
Isn't it funny that the last time I updated my CV was for a rental agreement, and I had to do one for my dog as well. So my dog has a more updated CV than I do.
Okay, well,
CV being a resume, the European term.
you don't need a resume anymore, Brian. I don't
know.
need a resume anymore. We've got enough right. We're not doing any CVs anymore. So I can see where your dog might. But on that note, okay, almost everyone we work with has pets. I mean, Americans just have pets, right? They come from houses, they have a doggy door, their dog goes in and out, they all have pets. And so it gets a little bit harder to find an apartment that will accept a dog. So a cat's a little bit easier, but it's not that they don't disallow the dog because they can't by law. But if you tell the landlord that you have a dog, they're going to choose someone else who doesn't have a dog to rent that apartment. So you sort of have to just not let them know you have a dog and then bring the dog later so that the landlord doesn't see the dog. One of our issues, though, is when one of our agents is representing our client to the landlord. This was one of our agents said that he's got this problem where he feels really guilty not he has a level of credibility, so it's kind of a problem for us to not actually divulge that they have an animal. But
So
know that if you have a pet, it's going to be a little more difficult.
quick question there, Adrian.
Yeah.
Are they allowed to charge you more for having an animal?
No, because they can't disallow the pet. In a long-term rental, not a short-term, but in a long-term rental, dogs and cats are perfectly allowed. I don't know of a single building in France that disallows pets. Do you, Patty? Patty, are you on?
Oh,
She's
I
on,
just
she's
turned on my
mute.
audio. No, you're legally entitled to have pets in a long-term rental.
Exactly.
Mhm.
So it's kind of it's a bit of a conundrum, you know, because, but if you tell them you've got some, you know, big dog, they're probably going to choose somebody else. It's kind of that simple.
Well, yeah, they'll move your dossier to the bottom of the pile and choose somebody else.
Exactly. For those of you, this is Patty Sadowskis. She's my right hand. She knows a whole lot more than I do about all of this. So I'm going to probably ask her questions along the way and she might chime in. So stay tuned. Okay, buying. Of course, buying, we all know this. This is stability and security. You know, this is an asset, a real asset that you own. Your name's on the deed. It might also be your children's names. One of the real upsides of buying a property in France for those who have become tax resident and still own a lot of assets in the United States and don't want their heirs to pay very high inheritance tax rates is by buying property in your heirs' names, in your children's names, so that they will own the property on your death without paying any inheritance taxes. So that's one reason I've been buying properties. I'm putting everything in my daughter's name, and it's a way of moving my U.S. assets over to her tax-free. So I think that's a really good reason. Maybe, Brian, you even have some comments on that.
It is a wonderful way to both diversify your currency and get assets out of your name. And it's the easiest way to get it out of your name because you're taking a smaller valuation of those assets that you're gifting to that next generation over, but you have control until the day that you pass away. So wonderful means to minimize the tax. It's much easier to deal with that than, say, the alternative, which is moving to Italy or Portugal.
No, we don't want to do that. Okay. We want to go there to eat and drink coffee, but we don't
Exactly.
want to live. Okay. Too anarchistic. But just on that note, I still have, you know, full rights until my death. It's called a démembrement in French. The notaire set it up. It's not very complicated. And I think it works really well for older people who, you know, just don't want to burden their children with high inheritance taxes. And of course, there's the long-term investment potential. You know, when I bought my apartment in Paris in the year 2000, it was at a real all-time low. And in today's world, that same apartment is worth 5 or 6 times what I paid for it. So there's a lot of growth, which would never have happened if I had still been renting. You know, and if I was renting, of course, that money just goes to the landlord's mortgage, not my own.
Now,
So it's just out the door.
since you got to play the good cop on that whole scenario, how about I play a couple of the other things to think about? If you haven't moved to France just yet, you want to make sure that you're consulting your financial advisor to actually make those gifts for that purchase before you get over to France, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
potentially any other gifts. So build those strategies, any gifting strategies before you get to France, because that will minimize any costs. And also will represent Jonathan Hadida right here and remind you by setting up a Société Civile Immobilier, an SCI, on your company, that might bring about the need to make more declarations on your American taxes. So essentially, that could be considered a partnership, and you want to consult your tax accountant beforehand so that that doesn't become a surprise.
Oh, clear. No,
the
no, no.
size of the scale.
That is absolutely for sure.
So
It's
the key
always
is make sure to talk to all the advisors across the board before we jump in to set those up.
well, okay, and also in terms of the upside of buying is the freedom to renovate and to customize, because let's face it, you get to have exactly what you want.
Mhm.
And I don't think anybody has renovated more than I have. If it hasn't been my property, I've been involved in other properties, and I do want what I want, you know. I like to live a certain way and it has to be specific, and I'm not comfortable if I'm not surrounded by my own things and my own personality and color and whatever. And when you're in a rental apartment, unfortunately, you're at the mercy of the landlord's furniture and artwork and whatever. So there is that in terms of the advantage to buying.
Absolutely.
So what are the
Customize it.
downsides?
Build it for what you want it to be. I was going to ask you about that first slide, what that nice little the nice little building was.
Which one? The going back one?
Your first slide. I was just teasing you because
Okay. I'm not going to go back to the back.
no,
Back to
no,
the
you don't
beginning,
need to.
Brian. Okay. But okay, so what are the downsides? Okay, the upfront costs. So when you've invested 7 to 11% in the fees, basically the property needs to appreciate in value as much as of that before you really can sell it and not lose any money, right? So there's upfront costs. Financing for expats is pretty complicated at this point. They don't want to lend to people over the age of 60 and who are self-employed. And of course, because of FATCA, they don't really want American clients. So it's difficult to find financing. If everybody knows about FATCA, the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act, this was voted, it was signed by Barack Obama in 2010, and it places regulations on foreign financial institutions to report their American clients. And therefore, a lot of the banks don't want to do business with us anymore. So it has made financing a bit complicated. We do have a broker. We work with Simon Kahn, and he's in London, and he does have relationships with banks that are willing to lend to Americans. But as I said, it's simply not that easy. But Brian, you also have ways of finding lines of credit, right? So people can use their U.S. assets?
Absolutely. There's different mixes of being able to access funds, and the order should always be if you can get a mortgage, take the mortgage. So Adrian, Simon are definitely the first place to be talking to about financing anything. Secondarily, if you have property back in the States and you're able to borrow against that still, that is using a conventional mortgage space, and that should be the second place that you go. But for instance, if you're just needing a bridge loan and you have a couple of years from when you sell your property in the States and you're buying a property in France, and therefore you'll own both of them for a short period of time, using your securities as collateral can be a great means of borrowing those funds in between so that you don't have to sell everything in between. The rates are a little bit higher than the mortgage rates. We don't get any tax benefits from them, but essentially it keeps you from having to realize all those taxes on the pieces.
I mean, the rates in France right now are like 3.5%. So it's really good here.
Absolutely.
And when you're talking about a line of credit, you're probably looking at more like 5 to 6.
Probably more like 6 or 7 at this point in time.
Ooh, okay. Okay, so about half. I mean, half in France, if you can qualify.
We've got to remember the the European Central Bank has been decreasing rates faster than the Federal Reserve has been able to because of the risks of inflation that Trump brought about from the tariffs. Sorry, I don't know if am I allowed to use the Trump word in these sessions? Is that a curse word, or are those
In
banned?
that context, you haven't said anything that would be incorrect. You're good. Okay, you're good. Okay, so of course you do have full responsibility for the repairs. It's your own property, for crying out loud. So you need to make sure that you're taking care of it. But I want to make note that the carrying costs on property are so low in France. It's really crazy. Property taxes here are about 1/10 of what they are in the US. I just got all my property tax bills. And my property tax in Paris on an apartment that's worth about €1,000,000, give or take, is under €1,000 a year. If that property were in California at 1.25%, I'd be paying $12,500 annually instead. So it's really pretty amazing. And I think it's another really good reason actually to own in France because the carrying costs are so low.
Well, what your annual tax on that property? What are you typically paying?
That's what I'm saying. Under €1,000 a
Under
year.
1,000, and yet what would you pay in California? 2% of
12,500.
There you go.
1.25% is what it would.
It's incredible. So
it's incredible.
I
was just going to say that I ask our clients regularly, how much do they pay in property tax? Okay, it's one of my #1 questions. And, you know, in some states, in some places, it's not really bad. But if it's not really bad, it's like 5,000 or 6,000 a year. That's what's really good.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard insane figures from some people. And, you know, for properties that are the same value. So it really is amazing. Overall, I'd say it's about 1/10. Then there are other aspects, like, for instance, my internet, my TV and my telephone are 35 euros a month, not 200 a month. You know, my utilities in Nice are 55 euros a month. I hear the stories from the States, and I know that the carrying costs are just.
Adrian, the other thing to add in there are HOA fees.
Oh, right. HOA fees okay, so here in France, they average at like 45 euros per square meter per year. They're not expensive at all. So there's all of that, so buying in France, this is on my list of downsides, but the truth is it's an upside because by comparison to the US, it's very inexpensive. But
Well,
yes,
we-
you're
when we-
responsible for repairs.
When we budget for those, the maintenance and lifestyle costs typically in France are 1 to 2%, right, of the value, whereas in America it would be 3 to 5%.
Right, so there you go, half. I
Which
mean,
is
I know, Brian, that you can live in either way, whether you rent or you purchase, you can live in France for half of what it costs you to live in the US. We know this. It's just the way it is. And everybody who's experienced the change moving over here has agreed with that. It's what they say, that's costing them half as much to live in France. But okay, anyway, I'm going to keep going, okay, because I know that renovating and I like buying a wreck and renovating it and getting it exactly the way I want it. I just did it with my own apartment. I'm about to do it again with an apartment I'm buying for my daughter that needs a complete reno, and I'm going to move rooms around and everything else. But you do have to realize that it's, you know, timelines aren't always on time. Things don't always happen on time. I got really lucky with my renovation of my apartment in Paris because Martine Di Matteo, who's my designer and contractor, and we've been working together for more than 20 years. I said to her about 4 months ago, can you renovate my apartment and by the end of August because my landlord won't extend my lease? And she said, it'll be tight, but we can do it. And damn, she did it. In the middle of the summer, she actually managed to get me into the apartment by the end of August. I was shocked. Now, granted, a few things weren't 100% done. In fact, I just had the kitchen countertop installed today, but I was still able to move in and live in it. But you have to know that stuff happens. Things don't get delivered on time. In the summer, it's really tough. So your timelines might double. Budgets. You can start and think, okay, it's only going to cost me X amount. And before you know it, you've got, you know, a little bit more. And the reason for that is because not really that the contractors are charging you more, but maybe you're going to choose materials that were more expensive than you expected. And maybe you're going to make changes. I had several changes in my apartment that cost me a little bit of money. My apartment in Paris. We installed this beautiful shower door, only to discover that I can't access the faucets, okay, with the shower door in. You have to get into the bathtub. So I called Martine and said, I think we need to remove the shower door and start over. So these are the kinds of things that just happen. They're, you know, not necessarily mistakes. You make choices and then you don't like them. So you have to pretty much assume that you're going to spend a little bit more money. But bottom line is you've got the home of your dreams. I wouldn't personally do it any other way. I mean, but she has spoiled me rotten. Okay, and just to give you a snapshot on this, with renting, okay, from a money standpoint, you've got a deposit and you're going to give them first and last month's rent. The deposit could be 1 or 2 months rent. And there's usually an agency fee and then our fees to find you a property. So you
Adrian, Can I add a
Yeah.
correction there?
Sure.
There'll be a deposit plus first month's rent.
Mhm.
It depends on whether it's a 1 year
Well,
or a 3 year.
It's a
Okay.
1 month deposit on an unfurnished rental and a 2 month deposit on a furnished rental.
Right.
Plus 1 month's rent.
Well, first and sometimes last month as well.
No, never last month's rent. For 1 or 2 months deposit plus 1 month's
I
rent.
did on my rental, I did, by the
Okay.
way.
Okay, that's not the norm.
Okay, well, that was through an agency.
Yep, that's not the
Through an
norm.
agency, and I am now hoping to get back my deposit and my last month's rent. But that could be just the policy of that agency. Because that agency that I worked with specialized in short-term rentals. So it wasn't a standard.
Right.
Mm-hmm. But you can pretty much figure that whatever your rent is, you better multiply it by 3, 4, or 5.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Okay. But with buying, okay, but some of that is rent and the deposit you get back. So the only thing you lose is, in essence, the agency fee, the fees for us to find you the property, and the rest comes back to you. In terms of buying, you're going to have notarial taxes and fees, which are 7 to 8%. They are non-negotiable. The notaires are highly regulated, and they did increase them by about 0.5% this past year. Our fees are somewhere between 3 and 4%, depending on the budget. And then the agency fees are included in the price. So whenever you see a property advertised, it includes the agency fees, which are normally 5 to 6%. And then when you have renovation, that of course is completely variable. And there are taxes on the renovation, but they differ based on the type of renovation you're doing. So who the contractor is and what work they're doing changes what the VAT or TVA is. Okay, so should you rent or should you buy? If you're testing the waters and you want flexibility, then rent. If you want to check out the town for the year or the neighborhood for the year, if you want to make absolutely sure that you're going to love France as much as you think you're going to love it, then rent. We have an incentive program so that when you hire us to rent, and we find you a rental property, and then you decide to buy within 2 years, and you hire us to find you a property to buy, we give you such a discount on that service that it pays for the cost of our helping you find the rental. So it's as if you were able to do that free of charge. So it's a really good deal. But buy if you're ready to settle, if you know you're going to be here, if you want stability and investment, if you want to do this for your kids, then buy. And renovate, I don't think you need to be brave. You might need to be patient and well budgeted, but you really shouldn't worry about having the courage, because we have really good renovation teams that are proven. We would never recommend them if they weren't, and you're gonna end up loving your property. So I would rather see you guys buy than rent, and not because it's our pocket at all, but because I think it does give you the stability, and it gives you the investment, and you can really call it your own. And we know you're not leaving France. If you're moving here, you're not leaving France. So other things to consider is that all leases have a 30-day cancellation in cities with a housing shortage, such as Paris and Nice. That is not necessarily true in other smaller towns. It is easier to find a fabulous property to own versus rent because of the housing shortage, and there's such a shortage of rental properties.
So in other words, if you sign a long-term lease, you can just cancel it at any time with 30 days notice, and you
in Paris and in Nice, even if it's a 3-year lease, you have a 30-day cancellation.
And
Yep.
they can't take away your deposit for that. There's no penalty for it.
Nope. By law, you can give them 30-day notice and you're out of there.
Amazing.
It's because of the housing shortage. They want movement of property, which of course they don't care about protecting the landlords. They care about protecting the tenant, not the landlord. So unfortunately, the landlords have to protect themselves, which is why they make it so tough. That's why it's so hard to get a property to be approved. You know, the landlords choose the tenant, you don't choose the property.
hmm
And that's why, because they have to protect themselves. So, you know, it really works against the tenant, but the laws are designed to protect the tenant.
In
And
economic terms, we call that unintended consequences.
well, that's exactly right. That's exactly the way it works. So you know, it can bite you in the butt is what can happen. But of course, you know, talking about the inheritance taxes, I know I've been talking a lot about that, but I'm in the middle of it. I understand it. You know, at my age, and realizing that, you know, I've got assets that I want my daughter to inherit, and I don't want her to have to pay 30 or 40% in order to keep, I don't want her to do that to keep the home that she grew up in. It just doesn't make sense to me. And I wish I could, you know, reform these laws, but unfortunately, I'm not a lawmaker in France. What can I say? So there we are. And now it's called Q&A time. And we've got plenty of time.
Adrian, if you don't
Yeah.
mind,
Yeah.
I'd love to talk a few financial terms on these that will cover some of the Q&A if you don't mind. 'Cause
Okay,
that was
I'm going to stop share though so we can see
absolutely,
everybody.
absolutely.
Okay,
Everybody's got
good.
your contact. So I wanted to talk a little bit more on the financial side of renting versus buying, because there's some of these scenarios that you'll recognize these from back home. The first rule that some of you might have heard of is the 30% rule. The 30% rule is simple. Basically, you don't want to be spending more than 30% of your gross monthly income on housing. You know, that's a simple vantage point, and sometimes that will lean you towards renting or buying just because the actual ratios might be a little bit different. But if you're talking to Simon about getting a mortgage, they're definitely going to use the 30% rule. They're really, really stuck on different numerics and being able to prove those.
And that's why Guarant Me won't certify you for more than 1/3 of your disposable income. Same story.
Exactly. Now, if you're going to go and you have other debt in the States, so 30% rule, that's just talking, I'm going to get a mortgage and that's the only thing I'm thinking about. If there's any other debt, there you're probably looking at the 28-36 rule. 28 being the amount of debt on the mortgage, 36 basically being the total debt in credit cards, car loans, student loans, everything else. So if you have tons of other debt, you might have to tackle that before you can get in there. Now, getting down to things, typically in the US, we would say, don't buy unless you're going to own a property for at least 5 years because you need to recapture the cost going into it.
I would agree with that.
Because of the higher upfront costs, a lot of people will say 7 to 8 years, i.e., be thinking a little bit longer term. Right now, we've got a great market in certain places.
Depends on the property market though, too, Brian,
100%.
because
100%.
you know, the only market in all of France that has really seen increases happens to be Nice and the PACA region. Paris has been soft and down. It's doing a little bit better, but it's been since COVID, Paris has been, you know, a little bit soft. Okay. The most increases that happened were between 1998 and 2020.
Ballpark, do you know what those increases were?
Well, it depends on the neighborhoods, of course.
Absolutely.
The most we just published or we will be publishing tomorrow actually, because tomorrow's Thursday, right? In French Property Insider, the latest figures for Paris and the Île-de-France. And as it turns out, my predictions have been correct. I love that because districts 1 through 4, Paris Centre, has seen the biggest increases of the entire city. I mean, they are just, you know, and why are they doing so well? Because they're closing cars. They're closing it to cars. It's become mostly pedestrian. And that, no matter where they do that, values go up. So we've seen those districts really increase. But as I said before, I've seen my property go from the year 2000 to now, 5 to 6 times what I paid for it. So Paris was fabulous all those years. And as a result of those increases, I was able to take, which you know, because I was working with you on this, 4 additional equity release loans to buy other properties by virtue of the increase in the Paris property. Now, that's happening in Nice, though. I've seen the prices in Nice literally go up 30-40% in the last 3-4 years.
And we have to remember, one of the biggest reasons that real estate has done so well, I'm going to expand it from that period of time to from 1980 till present, is because 1980 was when we had the highest interest rates, and they've been going down pretty much ever since. We've had a little bit of a bump up because of the inflation that came from COVID, right? But
Right.
now most would expect that interest rates will continue to go
Down.
back down because of a little
Right.
bit of an economic slowdown. I.e., if we have a 40-year period where the correlation is real estate goes up when interest rates go down, and we're
That's right.
expecting the next couple of years that interest rates are going to go down
Property's
because
gonna
of the
go up.
effect of global
Mhm.
tariffs that are brought about by the Trump administration slowing down the general economy, and that brings down interest rates. What can we expect? Real estate should be a hot topic.
I'd like to make a comment at that because I'm talking to people every single day, and I'm seeing how, people are losing their jobs, right? And so I think the property market in the United States is getting a little bit scary, quite honestly. So when people ask me, should they sell their house, now, okay, before they move, I don't know. I don't know what to say to them about what it's going to look like a year or 2 years down the road. So maybe now's the best time to sell before they move to France.
I play a ratio game. I look at 2 ratios when it comes to real estate. I look at the average earnings in an area, and I look at the rental prices in an area. The rental prices become very easy. If the annual rent is 1/15 or less than the price of property in that area, basically it's basically a great buy for real estate. So therefore, you
If
would
the
not
rent is
want to sell
1/15, if the rent is
1/15
1/15 of the value of the
the
property,
property.
the annual
If it's
rent.
over 25, then basically it's better to rent. They should go ahead and sell and just rent an apartment in that zone.
Okay.
Because naturally, if one person loses a job, it's horrendous for them, right? But what we really want to look at is, can other people afford those properties and those rentals? And so the rental
Right.
market is actually going to fluctuate just as much as the pricing market. And what we want to find out is, if they're staying in that area for 2 years before they move over, are house prices in their local area really overpriced?
Right. Well, see, a lot of people are, they're afraid of selling their house because they're thinking, well, I might go to France, spend a year, and then want to move back and not be happy in France, right?
Mhm.
So it's their safety net. But I don't know anybody who moves back, okay? I mean, once you come here, it's really hard to like go in reverse and put your blinders back on. And of course, we just don't know what the market's going to look like.
And you're just going to subject yourself to French tax on selling that property in the US when you're resident in France.
That's true too. If you sell before, then and you're not yet tax resident in France, then you're not going to pay taxes in France. Right.
So the most important thing before you leave to France is to make sure to do the analysis of what your financial situation, what your tax situation looks like prior to leaving, so that you don't give yourself a whole bunch of tax nightmares once you're in France that you could have easily avoided. The gift tax issues that you were talking
Right.
about earlier, so that you can go ahead and make those gifts and get those properties into the next generation's name. These are all things that are easily avoidable by pre-planning, instead of just trying to make sure that you have a foot in every single corner. Then you're going to have a tax bill in every single corner.
Okay, well, on that note, should we open up the Q&A to see what people want to know about?
I think that would be a great idea.
Okay, we're gonna let
Patty,
Patty be monitoring it.
are you our Vanna
Ooh.
White, Patty?
Yeah,
I'm
she's
doing
our
all
Vanna
right. We've
White.
got lots of interesting questions. And I think I'll start, Adrian. We've got some questions about buying and then reselling as a viager.
Oh, sure. Of
Mhm.
course you can resell as a viager.
Why don't you define what a viager is first, Adrian?
Okay, a viager is basically a life annuity. I love the concept of viager, okay, because I think it's brilliant. You're basically betting on someone's death, okay? But the idea is that when you're older, okay, probably realistically 80 years old plus, you can actually sell your property while you're alive, continue to hold the rights of usage, get what's called a bouquet, which is a down payment, then get paid every single month. So it's kind of like the viager person is holding a mortgage. The person's buying the property. You still have the rights of usage till your death. And that means that you're getting a return on your investment while you're still alive. So if you have no heirs, it's a great solution. It's amazing. So it's another reason actually to invest in a property. Even, even if you think I don't want to own again, I'm going to rent, you're going to have this income. You'll have this down payment, this bouquet, and an income the rest of your life. It's amazing. Yeah.
So what age though, let's just say somebody is of or near retirement age, does it make sense, and this could be a Brian part too, to buy a property and then later sell it as a viager, and like how long do you wait?
Well, I think, but Patty, it really depends on age because no one's going to
Sure.
buy a viager if you're young and healthy.
No,
Okay.
I know that, but I'm just saying, but do you buy, let's just say you're 60 or 65, how long do you hold on to that property? Till you're 80 to sell it as a viager then?
Well, it changes the taxable situation on the annuity portion on the regular income. So if you do it after 70, you go into a lower tax bracket in France than if you did it when you're younger. But it actually just depends on the financial needs of the individual. If you need income early, it's the same rules with Social Security. When's the optimal time to take your Social Security? You tell me when you're going to die, and I can tell you when the optimal time is. But for most people, it's going to be if they're by themselves. When do you need the actual income, and how much income do you need? If you can wait longer, you'll get more, right?
It makes sense for people who don't have heirs. Right?
Absolutely.
If you're alone, you're alone and you might as well sell it as a viager.
And it also makes sense for people that have heirs, but the heirs don't want to have anything to do with France. They want to
That's true. They don't
dispose
want
of
the
the
burden.
property.
Right, they don't
Let's
want
say
the
your
burden.
kids are back in the States. They want the cash, et cetera, et cetera. But they don't know anything about France, and they don't want to have to come over and take care of the notarial deeds when mom or dad have passed away. So it keeps things as clean as possible
That's
because
true too.
there's lots of scenarios that it's a great way of getting a nice income and to keep things as clean as possible.
There are a couple of great movies about viagers that are really worth watching. One is called My Old Lady with Kristen Scott Thomas and Kevin Kline and Maggie Smith. It was only like 5 to 10 years old, that takes place in Paris. It's a wonderful film for those who want to see what a viager is. And then there's an old one from the late 50s, early 60s called Le Viager. It's in French and it's particularly hilarious. And I won't go into the story, but it's one of those French comedies that's so stupid, it's funny. So if anybody wants to see, and I used to own a viager. I owned a viager that was kind of an unusual situation, but I ended up selling it, buying it very, very cheaply, selling it 5 years, renovating, selling it 5 years later, and I tripled my I sold it for 3 times what I paid for it.
Amazing.
I mean, can't complain. Okay, anyway,
Anyway.
Addie.
So moving on then, we've got some other questions about when you're buying the property and titling it in a child's name, can you do that if the child's a minor?
Yes, you could, they're your heirs,
Mhm.
right? Yes.
Okay. That was a quick and easy answer.
Well, I mean, I understand the other thing, the other question I saw here though is, if it's not necessarily your children, your heirs could be anyone. I had a client today who would like to bequeath her assets to her niece. She doesn't have any kids, for example. Okay. And really what happens is as Americans, we can elect US inheritance law rather than French inheritance forced heirship. But the taxation is still France's taxation. So it's all you do is create a French will that refers to your US will. And then you can bequeath whatever you want to whomever you want.
Why it's important that Adrian's identifying that you're still subject to the tax is that the French tax is dependent on how close or distant somebody is.
That's
In
right.
other words, a direct relative like son, daughter, will not be taxed at a very high
Much.
rate. No,
It's
much.
the lowest rate.
It's the
Children are
lowest
the
rate.
lowest
Well, no,
rate.
the lowest rate is a spouse because they're not taxed.
Right.
But
Spouse, right. Then
the more distant you become, the higher rate you get into. And if you're not related at all, you might as well just give the money to the government because it's all going to the government anyways.
you know, one reason that France gives out so many visas to retired Americans, okay, is because, let's face it, retired Americans come over here, become tax resident here, and have lots of assets. And so France ends up benefiting based on the inheritance taxes.
Absolutely.
I mean, so when I know, so when I have clients who feel guilty because they've come over to France with their visa and then they're on the French healthcare system, even though they never paid into it, I like to remind them that France is going to see a lot of money thanks to them. So they should just relax.
But in a very good way, I'd rather pay my tax when I die than when I'm living. So I would rather be in France and then pay my tax to France when I'm dead than right now.
Well, that's one way to look at it for sure.
Good point.
Okay. What else, Patty?
What else do we want to talk about? Well, this could be, I don't know, this is on the same subject. As a retiree without heirs, does it still make sense to buy and tie up assets? Maybe that's a Brian question.
A lot of times, yes. It depends on essentially the listing of priorities. To me, a lot of our retired clients do want to, and as Adrian pointed out, there's benefits from an estate planning purpose that you're able to get assets over to the next generation by buying real estate, which you couldn't do if you were renting. A retired person also probably knows where they want to spend their time for the longer period of time. It's not going to be driven by, say, a job moving them to a new town or whatever else it might be. So a lot of our retired clients will want to go ahead and commit that for that.
There's the diversification of the currency. I mean, you're buying into a euro asset.
Absolutely. But if you're not selling it, that might or might not affect us as big in as
but
big
then
of
you
a
can
way.
sell it as a viager.
Absolutely.
Then you're basically getting a return on your own investment.
But if the financial plan will allow the purchase of a house and the person, it fits into their lifestyle of wanting to commit to that, 7, 8 years plus, essentially it means you're not going to have to worry about a hike in rent way down the road. You're not going to have to think about a landlord potentially wanting to ask them to move because they're selling the property or whatever it might be.
You can live in it the rest of your life. That's right.
Stability in that property. To me, that it's where somebody is in a lifestyle, not is it a good idea for all retired people. If you're the right person, that should be an owned property for sure.
Okay. I'm looking at the questions too to see what we have.
Okay, hop on anything you see. I was trying to.
Oh, I love this one. In Carcassonne, okay, the property taxes are much higher than what you're quoting. And that is because property taxes are higher in the countryside because they don't have as much infrastructure to support the tax. In other words, the way the taxes are assessed is based on, how many people and commercial supports the tax need, right? So the pie gets split up. So Paris taxes are actually very low. Property tax in Paris is much lower than in Nice, for example, because the pie gets split up way more. So you will find that the property taxes outside of the major cities are going to be higher, and in the countryside higher.
I found one that I'd love to tackle from Victor. Can we put a French property in an LLC or trust or something like that? And I'll jump on that, and I'm going to reverse the question. So what you really want to be asking is, should I put it in an LLC or a trust? And you definitely want to make sure you consult with a great lawyer before answering that question.
Trust you can't. Trust is, you cannot do a trust.
You can get it through a back end into a trust, but you will create yourself a nightmare on French taxes.
Nightmare.
Complete
No,
nightmare. So that's why I changed it to, do you really want to have it in one of those structures? Because most of the things that you want to accomplish, you might be able to accomplish through the SCI, which is the French formation, and you have as many.
But you can buy a property as an LLC.
100%.
No question about it. I've done it myself. However, the taxation on that property when you sell is much higher than when it's in your own name.
Exactly. So it goes back to, why are we wanting to do this? Can you? Yes.
What's the point?
Do you really want to? Probably not. And 99% of the time, yours was a very different situation.
Well, the properties that we fractionalize, okay, we buy in the name of a U.S. corporation so that the shares can be bought and sold on the U.S. side without going back through the French system. And those properties are almost never sold in their entirety because they're fractional. So people will sell their fraction, but they hold on to the property. And so that's, then it really makes sense. But otherwise.
Oh, can I pick on another one that really doesn't have to do with the subject, but
of course.
I just wanted to say Trump's name a third time. Is Brian starting to advocate that American expats move their retirement accounts out of the USA? I know that it's advisable to keep retirement accounts in the US, for example, with Schwab. Is that attitude changing under a second Trump regime? I had this question from a client today. I haven't started moving IRAs or 401ks outside of the United States, and the main reason is because costs are that much higher. That being said, I do have the vendors to set them up, and I'm prepared just in case Trump becomes even more disastrous and hurting us. Now, this is where it's important. This is why I bring this up, even though it's not on topic for the webinar. There is a bill from a Republican out in Arizona that is advocating to take away our rights to vote as Americans abroad. We need to make sure that bill does not go through, because if we lose the right to vote, then we could be subject to much, much more and much more pain. The big, beautiful tax bill, I was fearing and could be feared that there might be a remittance tax held against us. And right now, most people are not looking at it that way, but it'd be very easy for them to change. So we need to keep our rights up as Americans that live abroad. And I do have the means to move clients' IRAs outside of the United States. Right now, I'm just too cheap to do so.
This is Tea Party stuff. Excuse me, but if I don't have the right to vote, then I'm not paying my taxes. Okay?
Wasn't the Tea Party their thing? Wasn't that the beginning of the whole matter?
If we get into a Trump conversation, we're definitely in trouble.
We're dead.
Okay? Because
turn off the recording. We're getting canceled in that way.
Okay, what else, Patty? I see all sorts of interesting things.
Well, I was going to bring up the question about homeowners insurance and renters insurance. Is there an increased fire? And is there an increased fire hazard in Nice? No.
Okay, you're going to love this. I got a new quote. I decided that I was paying too much in Nice for my homeowner insurance. And so I went to my bank that offers insurance, and it's 20 euros a month for my homeowner insurance in Nice. It's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, renter's insurance is really not a big deal. You just add a multi-risk to the
It's
policy.
the same price. It's the same price as homeowner's insurance.
Yeah, but if you rent your property out,
Oh, rent it out, yes.
then you add a multi-risk to it,
Yeah.
which is very inexpensive. But yeah, it's going to be 20 or 30 euros a month for your homeowner insurance. But the building, you have to know that the building is insured by the building, so you're only insuring your own contents. In effect.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, there was a rental question. Now I have to find it. Ah. If you see something, Adrian, I'm looking, go ahead and jump in.
Yeah, well, okay, so I see a lot of questions like about being able to buy a property for investment and being able to rent it out.
Mhm.
Okay, and generating a revenue. That totally depends on, well, you can, yes, the answer is you can always do that. Okay, you can always make it available. Cities like Paris and Nice, the short-term rentals are more difficult to achieve, but you can always rent a property 30 days or more on what's called a mobility lease, which is 1 to 10 months to someone who's here on business or education. And you probably have already discovered that when you're looking for apartments to rent, that you have a lot more apartments to choose from when it's a 30-day rental and more. And by the way, just for you guys, for your information, I am now the owner of a property at number 99 Promenade des Anglais that we call 99 Prom in Nice. It's on the water. It's a studio apartment with its own private garden, and I will be making it available to all of our clients for rental, and as of November 1st. And so if you have any interest in that, you might want to jot us an email just to info@adrianleeds.com and ask about 99 Prom. We're getting it ready for rental. And it's a really beautiful, lovely little property.
Okay, here's the rental question I wanted to ask. Are there any
Okay.
effective strategies to help snag a rental property, say in Paris or Nice? Like agreeing to provide a larger deposit or more prepaid rent?
You mean like how do you convince the landlord that it should be you and not somebody else?
Well, I mean, my answer to this is going to be work with us.
Well, yeah.
Work with us because we have relationship with agents in both Paris and Nice, and we'll make the direct contact. It's not typical to offer a larger deposit or to prepay rent. We wouldn't suggest prepaying
You
rent.
have to be careful about the money situation
Yeah.
because the French are very averse to conversation about money.
Mhm.
It's not that they don't like money, it's just taboo. It's just gauche and horrible to talk about money. And they're not deal makers. And so, you can insult them and you don't want them to just be insulted and walk away. And they don't want to hear about how rich you are. That would be the last thing you'd want them to know.
Mhm.
But they do want to get paid. They want their rent to come in every month. So it's a bit of a it's a bit of a tricky situation.
It is. It
Quite
is.
honestly. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it?
You might remember in order to get my apartment in Nice,
Yeah.
after they told me no a couple times, I offered more rent.
Yeah,
I got
but
scolded. I got scolded.
yes, it wasn't why you got
No,
the apartment.
I did get the
reason you got
apartment.
The reason
but
you got the apartment was because I then wrote you a letter saying what a
yeah,
great employee you were. Okay.
right.
Who scolded you, the renter or Adrian?
No, the owner.
The agency scolded me.
Like, yeah, don't
Yeah,
also,
we don't do
do
that.
that.
So don't do
No,
that.
no, it's very uncool. They
Yeah.
don't like people who are throwing their money around.
Mhm.
It's interesting because even when you're at a restaurant, okay, if you leave a big tip, we think we're being nice, that we're trying to show that they did a great job. But they think you're just throwing your money, that you're actually showing off that you have money. It's not okay. It's interesting.
Adrian, I'm really
It's
sorry
8
to say
o'clock.
this.
I know.
We are at the top of the hour.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Now, first of all, Thank you, thank you, Patty. Thank you, Adrian, for all of your experience. How do
Thank
we
you,
get a hold of
Brian.
you for any questions or consultations? Because I know there's tons of questions in there.
Okay, well, it's pretty easy. Okay, adrianleeds.com is the website, ADRANLEEDS. And then info@adrianleeds.com gets us an email. On a website, there's a contact form that you can fill out. We have, Brian, let's not forget, we have another forum, which we're going to be talking about taxes on December 10th.
Absolutely.
That's going to be promoted in our newsletters. We do 3 newsletters a week, and you can sign up for them and get lots of information. This has been recorded. You and I are both going to make this available on our YouTube channels, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, and we now have all these questions. So I'm going to take these questions and I'm going to try to address some of them in some upcoming newsletters. The questions that, sort of really make sense and I can see people want to know. But there's no question that consulting with us on a one-on-one basis really helps answer all of these questions and helps people figure out where to live in France. Rather than, going on some crazy wild goose chase all over the country, we can really help them figure out what's going to be best for them, what cities make sense, what neighborhoods in a particular city make sense, things like that.
Absolutely. I mean, you said it best. Renting offers you flexibility while buying builds
Gives you
equity over the
stability.
course of time.
Yes,
So
exactly.
essentially, you want to make sure you figure out where that forever spot is, but you want to get that forever spot as early as possible, right? It's not.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And we can certainly help them do that. I would also like to say that, we end up doing a really good job finding rentals, like amazing. Our teams in both cities are amazing. And that is because they're doing this all day long and they're working with a lot of the same agencies. And the agencies know that we have good clients. We have qualified clients who have paid us to do the work, who can afford the apartments, and they have learned that Americans make really great tenants. Okay. They respect the property. They love being here. They pay their rent, all those things. Okay. And so we end up being very successful because trying to do it on your own is near to impossible. I mean, you can do it. Okay. If you're really savvy, you can do it, but it's really hard.
It's the obstacles. It's the questions that you didn't know to ask that Patty and Adrian deal with on a daily basis.
Well, and
That
the
change
agents
the
aren't gonna,
it changes the entire experience, knowing which questions to ask, knowing which obstacles are going
and
to.
they're not going to tell you things you didn't ask. In France, they don't, you have to know what question to ask to get the right answer, right? And the agents aren't going to tell you things that might deter you from buying or renting that property. Let's face it, that's all they want to do is sell it or get it get it rented. So while we are really looking for all the downsides of a property to make sure that it's really great for our clients, because that's the business we're in, is helping our clients make the best decisions, period, whether it's to rent or buy.
Exactly.
So anyway, that's my pitch.
Oh, I'm going to make my shameless pitch.
Oh, please do.
Sitting with a literary genius like Miss Adrian Leeds, that
Oh yeah.
writes constantly. It's taken me 15 years of knowing her for me to publish my first book, Borderless Living. It is just a guide from a financial vantage point of how to move abroad and how to deal with your finances. We just tell some fun little anecdotes and fun little stories. You'll have seen on the 30th of September from Adrian's newsletter, we're going to be offering a copy for 99 cents. So jump
Plus
on
a
in.
webinar.
What's that? Yep.
Plus a webinar at 2 o'clock.
We've got the webinar on the
Paris time.
30th. And
Right,
then we're going to be offering copies to everyone for 99 cents. So you don't even have to pay big bucks for it. But you'll have some fun with it. It will hopefully help you answer some of those financial questions that you never thought you needed to.
I can't wait to read it, Brian.
Adrian's got 5 wonderful quotes in there.
I know that's very kind of you, but I can't wait to read it because I know it's just filled with brilliant information. So to all of you out there, thank you very, very much for joining us today. And I hope we've answered at least some of your questions, and it helps you make the big decision whether to rent or to buy. And I guess we'll be back soon, won't we? December 10th is the next forum. Your webinar's on September 30th at 2 p.m.
30.
France time.
Exactly.
Okay, and look
And
for
we-
us on YouTube.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Adrian. Thanks so much,
Thanks,
Patty.
Thank you, Brian. Thank
See you
you,
soon.
Paulina. Thank you, Patty. Bye, everyone.